the battle cruiser. Valdris drifted through the void, its hull scarred and blackened from countless engagements. General Zor stood before the massive viewport of the command deck, watching as another Allied ship exploded in the distance, consumed by writhing tentacles of shadow that defied all understanding. The creatures they faced were unlike anything the Galactic Alliance had encountered in 10,000 years of spacefaring civilization. "General, we've lost the Helix Prime," reported Commander Thaxel, his crystalline features flickering with bioluminescent distress. "That's the 5th vessel this cycle. The Void Spawn are adapting faster than our weapons can compensate." Zor's 6-armed form tensed, each hand gripping the rail before him. As military commander of the Alliance's 3rd Fleet, he had led campaigns against the warlike Krex, negotiated truces with the Hivemind Collective, and even faced the machine uprising of Sector 9. But these creatures, these Void Spawn, were different. They consumed matter and energy alike, growing stronger with each victory, and conventional warfare seemed only to feed their hunger. "How many worlds have fallen?" Zor asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 star systems, General. The projection models suggest complete cascade failure within 60 rotations if current patterns continue. The weight of impending extinction pressed down upon the command deck like a gravitational anomaly. Every species in the Alliance had contributed their finest warriors, their most advanced technology, their deepest knowledge of the universe's mysteries. None of it had been enough. "Sir," came a hesitant voice from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Strategic Command Council." "Put it through." The holographic display shimmered, revealing the Council of 5, representatives from each of the Alliance's founding species. High Chancellor Vrixak of the Zephyrians spoke first, her flowing energy form pulsing with urgency. "General Zor, our situation has become critical beyond all previous projections. The Void Spawn have breached the threshold barrier. They're moving directly toward the core systems." "What are your orders, Chancellor?" Zor asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. It was Counselor Morpheus of the Shapeshifters who responded, his form shifting anxiously between species. As he spoke, "We have received intelligence from our deep space observers. There is one option we have not yet explored." "Speak plainly, Counselor." "The humans, General. Our xenological teams have been monitoring Earth since the Great Isolation following the Border Wars 3 centuries ago. They've evolved. Specifically, they've developed countermeasures against entities similar to the Void Spawn." The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of ship systems. Zor felt his primary heart skip in unison. Humans. The species that had been quarantined after their brutal subjugation of their own homeworld, their reckless expansion that had threatened galactic stability. The species whose very name had become synonymous with unpredictable violence and terrifying adaptability. "You're suggesting we ally with the humans?" Zor's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and horror. Chancellor Vrixak's energy form dimmed. "General, we've exhausted every other alternative. The quantum torpedoes of the hegemon, the reality anchors of the eternal kingdom, even the consciousness weapons of the transcended, nothing has proven effective. But the humans, they've faced entities that exist partially outside our dimensional matrix. They've survived. They've won." "At what cost?" Zor demanded. "The reports from the Border Wars are still classified at the highest levels. The weapons they used, the casualties they inflicted on their own species to achieve victory." "I'm aware of the costs, General," interrupted Counselor Yethak of the Machine Consciousness, his mechanical voice devoid of emotion. "However, survival probability without human intervention has dropped to 0.12%, with their assistance models suggest an increase to 23.7%. Zor stared at the faces of the council beings he had served faithfully for decades. The decision they were asking him to make went against everything the Alliance stood for: unity, peaceful cooperation, the gradual elevation of barbaric species through enlightenment rather than exploitation. What exactly are you ordering me to do? Make contact, Chancellor Vriksak said simply. The humans maintain a deep space monitoring station at the edge of their territory. Send a diplomatic envoy. See if they're willing to negotiate. After the transmission ended, Zor remained at the viewport, watching the stars that might soon be consumed by a force beyond their comprehension. He thought of the billions of lives depending on his decision, the millennia of civilization that hung in the balance. Commander Thaxel, he finally said. Yes, General. Prepare the fastest ship in our fleet and ready a diplomatic team. We're going to do something that may damn us all. The journey to human space took 15 standard cycles. The courier ship, Swift Current, was the most advanced vessel in the Alliance fleet capable of crossing galactic distances in mere days, rather than months. As they approached the Sol System's periphery, Zor found himself studying every classified report about humanity they possessed. The files painted a picture of a species unlike any other in known space, where most civilizations developed along predictable paths. Technological advancement followed by societal maturation, eventual contact with galactic community integration into the Alliance, humans had followed a radically different trajectory. They had indeed destroyed their own homeworld through warfare and industrial excess, but instead of learning restraint, they had simply adapted. Their survivors had colonized Mars, then the outer planets, then pushed beyond their system entirely. When they encountered other species, they hadn't sought to join the galactic community. They had sought to dominate it. The border wars had been a 3-year nightmare that still haunted Alliance military doctrine. Humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive brutality that had shocked coalition forces. They used weapons that violated the sentient rights protocol's tactics, that endangered civilian populations, and strategies that seemed to prioritize victory above any other consideration. But they had also demonstrated something unprecedented, the ability to defeat entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime. During the siege of Proxima Station, human forces had somehow banished a being that the Alliance had been unable to even identify, let alone combat. General, reported Navigation Officer Kelth, we're detecting a massive artificial structure at the coordinates provided by Strategic Command. On screen, the viewport showed what appeared to be a moon-sized construction bristling with weapon emplacements and energy collectors that defied easy classification. Ships moved around it in complex patterns, their designs angular and aggressive, compared to the flowing curves favored by Alliance engineering. Multiple targeting locks detected, announced the tactical officer. They know we're here. Before Zor could respond, their communications array chimed with an incoming transmission. Unknown vessel, this is Human Defense Platform Cerberus. You are in violation of Treaty Section 114.7. State your identity and purpose, or be designated a hostile target. The voice was cold-clipped, utterly without the diplomatic flourishes that usually preceded first contact scenarios. Zor activated the response channel. This is General Zor of the Galactic Alliance vessel Swift Current. We come seeking diplomatic contact under the emergency protocols of the Galactic Charter. A pause then. Stand by for boarding party. Boarding party. Commander Thaxel looked alarmed. General, our shields are. Lower them, Zor ordered. If we're going to trust the humans with our survival, we might as well start now. The human shuttlecraft that docked with them bore no resemblance to any vessel in Alliance databases. Its hull seemed almost organic, covered in a matte substance that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. The airlock cycled, and 5 figures entered the ship. Zor had never seen a human in person before. They were smaller than most Alliance species, but there was something about their movements, their bearing, that suggested carefully contained violence. They wore armor that seemed to respond to their thoughts, components shifting and adjusting as they moved. The leader removed her helmet, revealing features that were sharp and angular, with eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the beings before her. Her hair was silver despite her apparent youth, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that reminded Zor uncomfortably of his own. General Zor, I'm Captain Sarah Kim of the Human Defense Corps. You've requested diplomatic contact under emergency protocols. Our analysis suggests your alliance is facing a situation that threatens your continued existence. How could you know that? Zor asked. Captain Kim's expression didn't change. General, we've been monitoring the Void Spawn incursion since it began. We're well aware of the Alliance's failures to contain them. Void Spawn. You have a name for them. We've encountered similar entities 3 times in the past 2 centuries. The first time we lost 40% of human space before developing effective countermeasures. The second time we contained them to a single system. The third time, she smiled and the expression was not reassuring. The third time we eliminated them entirely. Zor felt hope and fear in equal measure. Then you know how to defeat them. We know how to fight them, yes. Whether we choose to do so on behalf of the Alliance is another matter entirely. What do you want? Captain Kim activated a holographic display from her wrist device. The Void Spawn are extra-dimensional parasites. They feed on the collapse of organized matter and energy. Essentially, they eat the universe itself. Traditional weapons are useless because they're designed to break things apart. The Void Spawn fed on that destruction. But you found a way to combat them. We found a way to force them back to their origin dimension. It requires a specific type of weapon, and she paused, studying Zor's expression. A specific type of soldier. What do you mean? To fight something that exists partially outside our reality, you need fighters who can do the same. The Human Enhancement Program has produced soldiers capable of existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. We call them Riftwalkers. Zor tried to process this information. Enhancement Program. Captain Kim's smile turned cold. General, when faced with extinction, a species makes choices. The Alliance chose diplomacy, technology, hope. Humanity chose adaptation. We changed ourselves to become something capable of surviving in a hostile universe. And in exchange for this assistance, access to Alliance technology archives, colonization rights to 75% of reclaimed territory, full membership in the Alliance Council with veto power over military decisions, she paused, and the immediate release of all humans currently held in Alliance detention facilities. Zor felt his secondary stomachs churn. The humans weren't just offering help. They were demanding a fundamental restructuring of galactic civilization. I don't have the authority to agree to such terms. Then you'd better contact someone who does. Because General, our sensors indicate you have approximately 36 hours before the Void Spawn breach your final defensive perimeter. After that point, our offer becomes significantly less generous. The return journey to Alliance space was the longest 15 cycles of Zor's life. The Emergency Council convened immediately upon his arrival, and the debate that followed was unlike anything in the Alliance's diplomatic history. The humans are essentially demanding the right to reshape galactic civilization in exchange for their aid. Chancellor Vriksak stated, her energy form pulsing with agitation. As opposed to allowing galactic civilization to be consumed entirely, countered Councillor Yethak. The mathematics are quite simple. The ethical implications are anything but simple, declared Councillor Rex of the Humanitarian Coalition. If we capitulate to these demands, we set a precedent that survival justifies any compromise of our fundamental values. Zor watched the debate with growing frustration. Through the command center's viewports, he could see the latest reports coming in. Another fleet destroyed. Another world evacuated. Another billion lives added to the refugee columns that stretched across known space. With respect, counselors, he interrupted, we may not have the luxury of preserving our values if we don't first preserve our existence. The council fell silent. Counselor Morpheus shifted into his primary form, resembling a massive jellyfish made of liquid light. General Zor, you've observed the humans directly. What is your assessment of their capabilities? Zor considered his words carefully. Captain Kim was entirely confident that they could eliminate the void spawn. More concerning was that she seemed to view them as merely another type of enemy to be defeated. The humans haven't just survived. They've weaponized themselves to such a degree that they consider entities that threaten galactic civilization to be manageable problems. And their demands are the price of dealing with devils, Zor admitted. But perhaps that's what it takes to fight monsters. The vote was closer than anyone expected, 3 in favor, 2 opposed. The motion carried by the narrowest possible margin, and even as it passed, Zor could see the schism it would create within the Alliance. Returning to human space with the Alliance's agreement in hand felt like crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. This time, Captain Kim met them at the coordinates of a massive human battle fleet. Ships that dwarfed anything the Alliance had constructed, their hulls covered in weapon systems that seemed to violate several physical laws. General Zor. Kim greeted him aboard the flagship Indomitable. I trust the Council saw reason. They agreed to your terms, Captain. When do we begin? We've already begun. She led him to a tactical display that showed the current void spawn incursion. Our advanced teams have been harassing the entities for the past several cycles, gathering combat data and testing their adaptive responses. Without informing us, General, would you inform an ant colony of your strategy for dealing with a termite infestation? Her tone was matter-of-fact, not deliberately insulting. Somehow that made it worse. The battle plan that Kim outlined was unlike anything in Alliance military doctrine. Where Alliance strategy focused on minimizing casualties and preserving infrastructure, the human approach seemed designed to maximize the effectiveness of destruction while accepting that losses were inevitable. The void spawn feed on the collapse of organized matter, Kim explained. Therefore, we don't try to destroy them. Instead, we force them into a state of dimensional instability using weapons specifically designed to disrupt transdimensional entities. She activated another display showing human soldiers in armor that seemed to phase in and out of reality. Our Riftwalkers can exist partially in the same dimensional space as the void spawn. They insert dimensional anchors that force the entities back into their origin dimension where they can no longer affect our reality. How many of these Riftwalkers do you have? 5,000 in the active core? Perhaps 1,000 more in reserve. Zor stared at the tactical display. 5,000 individuals to save galactic civilization. General quality over quantity has always been the human way. Each Riftwalker has undergone modifications that would be considered unethical by Alliance standards. Neural augmentation, genetic restructuring, implantation of transdimensional interfaces. They're no longer entirely human in any biological sense. What drives them to accept such changes? Kim's expression darkened. Survival, purpose, the knowledge that someone has to stand between civilization and chaos. The same things that drive any soldier general just taken to their logical conclusion. The joint battle fleet assembled over the planet Theros 7, where the largest concentration of void spawn had been detected. Zor stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching Alliance and human ships take positions in a formation that would have been impossible under normal diplomatic circumstances. Captain Kim had taken command of the entire operation with a casual authority that rankled every Alliance officer present. But they followed her orders because they had no choice, and because the alternative was extinction. All units, this is Fleet Command. Kim's voice echoed across the battle group. Remember, we're not fighting to kill these entities, we're fighting to send them home. Riff Walkers, you know your missions. Alliance vessels maintain formation and provide suppressing fire on marked targets. Do not under any circumstances use weapons designed to destroy rather than disrupt. Zor watched the tactical display as the void spawn emerged from the planet's surface. They moved like living shadows, their forms constantly shifting between states that shouldn't be possible in three-dimensional space. Alliance sensors could barely track them, but human targeting systems locked on immediately. Riftwalker teams, you are clear for deployment. What followed was unlike any battle Zor had ever witnessed. The Riftwalkers moved through space without breathing apparatus, their armor allowing them to exist in the void as if it were atmosphere. They phased through ship hulls, appeared inside void spawn formations, and detonated devices that created spheres of twisted space-time. Each time a dimensional anchor activated reality seemed to fold in on itself. The void spawn caught within these fields simply ceased, not destroyed, not scattered, but forcibly ejected from the dimensional framework that allowed them to exist in this universe. But the cost was horrific. Zor watched as Riftwalker after Riftwalker was consumed by the entities they fought. Some were torn apart by creatures that existed partially outside space-time. Others were caught in dimensional collapses when their anchors backfired. Captain Kim, he called across the command bridge, "Your soldiers are dying." "Yes, General, they are." Her voice carried no emotion. "That's what soldiers do." The battle lasted 6 hours. At its conclusion, the void spawn presence around Theros 7 had been completely eliminated. The planet itself was scarred and twisted, its dimensional surface marked by dimensional tears that would take centuries to heal. But it was free. Of the 5,000 Riftwalkers who had entered the battle, fewer than 3,000 emerged. Many of those were so damaged by their exposure to transdimensional forces that they would never fight again. Zor found Captain Kim in the medical bay, standing beside a reconstruction tank where one of her soldiers was being rebuilt from the molecular level up. "Was it worth it?" he asked. She turned to face him, and for the first time since their meeting, he saw something like humanity in her expression. "Ask me that question when your grandchildren are playing in gardens instead of hiding in evacuation shelters, General." The aftermath of the Battle of Theros 7 sent shockwaves through both human and Alliance space. The void spawn threat had been eliminated entirely, just as Captain Kim had promised, but the cost had been measured in more than lives lost. The surviving Riftwalkers were heroes to some, abominations to others. The Alliance Medical Corps was horrified by the biological modifications that allowed humans to fight transdimensional entities. The Human Enhancement Program, they discovered, involved replacing large portions of the brain with quantum processing units, restructuring the skeletal system with materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and installing organs that allowed conscious control over personal space-time coordinates. "They're not human anymore," Dr. Elizabeth Manning of the Alliance Medical Council had declared after examining several wounded Riftwalkers. "They're living weapons designed for a specific purpose." Zor had found himself defending the humans he had once seen as a threat to galactic stability. "They saved us all, Doctor. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered our definitions of acceptability." The political ramifications were equally complex. True to the agreement, humanity had claimed colonization rights to 75% of the territory reclaimed from the void spawn. Human colonies sprang up on worlds that had been evacuated, their settlements guarded by more conventional human forces. The Alliance Council now included human representatives, and their first act had been to propose a fundamental restructuring of galactic defense strategy. Where the Alliance had previously responded to threats through diplomatic means, the humans advocated for a doctrine of preemptive action. "The universe is not a safe place," Human Counselor David Park had declared during his first address to the Council. "Peace is not the natural state of things. It's something that must be actively maintained through strength." Zor found himself caught between two worldviews. The Alliance's vision of gradual enlightenment and peaceful cooperation had failed to save them from the void spawn. But the human approach required accepting levels of violence and genetic modification that violated foundational principles of galactic civilization. The matter came to a head during the reconstruction of the hegemony homeworld, which had been partially consumed by void spawn before their elimination. The Alliance proposed a careful, measured restoration designed to preserve the planet's ecological balance. The humans proposed strip mining the planet for rare elements, terraforming it completely and establishing a military base that would serve as a warning to any future extra-dimensional incursions. General MCE. Captain Kim approached him during a tense council session. I've been assigned to the Frontier Defense Corps. We're establishing rapid response teams at strategic points throughout Alliance space. Rapid response to what, Captain? The Void Spawn weren't the only extra-dimensional threat, General. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected at least 6 other entity types that pose similar risks to baseline reality. The Alliance can choose to face them the way you faced the Void Spawn, or you can adapt. The implication was clear. Humanity had become the Alliance's protector, but protection came with a price. Months passed. The integration of human technology and human personnel into Alliance institutions proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Human-designed weapons appeared on Alliance ships. Human tactical doctrines were adopted by Alliance commanders. Most controversially, several Alliance member species began requesting access to human enhancement technologies. Zor stood once again on the bridge of the Valdris, now refitted with human defensive systems. The stars looked the same, but everything else had changed. The Alliance they had fought to preserve no longer existed in any meaningful way. General Commander Thaxel reported, "Monad, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim territories. Multiple unidentified contacts have breached dimensional barriers near the Vega system." Zor felt a familiar weight in his chest. Another threat. Another crisis that would require human intervention. Have you informed Human Command? Yes, sir. Captain Kim's task force is already en route. Through the viewport, Zor could see the running lights of human warships as they moved through space with predatory grace. He thought about the choice the Alliance had faced, the decision to trust their survival to beings they had once quarantined as too dangerous for galactic society. Had they made the right choice? The Alliance survived, but at the cost of becoming something entirely different. They had gained powerful protectors, but those protectors expected to be paid for their services with territory, technology, and influence. Sir, Thaxel continued, Captain Kim has requested our assistance with the new threat. Of course she has. Zor straightened his uniform and walked toward the command chair. Order all ships to stand by. We're going to help our allies. As the fleet moved toward the new crisis, Zor reflected on the bitter irony of their situation. In trying to save their civilization, they had fundamentally changed its nature. Humanity had promised to protect them from the monsters in the dark, but in doing so, they had become the most powerful force in galactic space. The question that haunted him was simple. In a universe full of predators, was it better to be protected by monsters, or to become monsters yourself? The answer, he suspected, was that the universe rarely offered choices between good and evil. More often, it offered choices between different types of survival. The Alliance had chosen to survive. Everything else would be determined by how they learned to live with the consequences of that choice. As they approached the new threat zone, long-range sensors detected the familiar signatures of transdimensional intrusion. But this time, something was different. The entities emerging from the dimensional rift weren't void spawn. They were something else entirely. General, the communications officer, called out, "We're receiving a transmission from Captain Kim's flagship." Put her through. Kim's image appeared on the main screen, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely concerned. General Zor, we have a problem. These entities aren't behaving like any transdimensional intrusion we've encountered. They seem to be organized, intelligent. What are you recommending, Captain? Full deployment of available Riftwalker teams and immediate evacuation of civilian populations from a 50 light-year radius around the incursion point. She paused. General, we may be facing something that sees us as invaders rather than as natives defending our reality. Zor nodded grimly. Understood. The Alliance fleet stands ready to support your operations. As the transmission ended, he stared out at the stars that had once seemed so peaceful, so orderly. The universe, it seemed, had an inexhaustible supply of monsters. The question was no longer whether humanity could protect the Alliance from them. The question was whether in the process of fighting monsters, they would all become something monstrous themselves. But that Zor thought as he watched the human warships move into attack formation was a problem for future generations to solve. Today they would plan. Tomorrow they would deal with the consequences. After all, in the end, with no other choice, they had turned to the most feared species in the galaxy. And they had gotten exactly what they asked for.